Nobody really prepares you for the moment a stranger sits down beside you and changes the entire direction of your life with a single sentence. But that's exactly what happened on the crisp October morning I wandered into Harlan Park trying to outrun a loneliness I couldn't quite name, and found an elderly man sitting on my favorite bench as if he'd been waiting for me long before I ever arrived. I hesitated at first. Nobody likes sharing their quiet place, but there was something about him that felt strangely familiar, even though I was almost certain I had never seen him before. His old tweed coat was buttoned all the way to the collar despite the sun, and his worn brown shoes tapped lightly against the ground with the slow rhythm of a man deep in thought. He noticed me before I could turn away. "You can sit," he said gently, without looking up. "There's room for two." His voice was calm and warm, the kind older people use when they've lived long enough to understand the world won't give them many more good days. I sat down cautiously, leaving a respectful gap between us. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. The leaves rustled overhead, and the distant laughter of children drifted across the park like echoes from a time that already felt far away. Then he said, "You look like someone who's carrying too much around." I tensed. It was such an odd thing for a stranger to say, yet so accurate it almost frightened me. "It's been a rough year," I admitted carefully. "Ah," he murmured, "years can be cruel, some more than others." He turned his head and finally met my eyes. His gaze was soft but unsettlingly perceptive, like someone who had spent a lifetime studying people long enough to see the stories behind their faces. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mark," I replied. "You?" He hesitated. "People used to call me Edward," he said, "but these days I feel like names belong more to the memories than to the person." His answer confused me, but he didn't give me time to dwell on it. Instead, he looked out at the pond and said, "Do you know why I come here every Wednesday?" I shook my head. "To remember," he whispered, "and to forget." His voice carried a sadness I couldn't place, the kind that makes you instinctively lean in without knowing why. He sighed deeply. "You see that tree over there? The tall one with the split trunk?" I nodded. "That's where I met her," he said. "Who?" "My wife." I smiled politely. "That's beautiful." "No," he said softly, shaking his head. "It was tragic. Beautiful things usually are." His fingers tightened around the wooden cane resting in his lap. "She used to come here every morning before work. She said the world only made sense in the first light of day." He chuckled quietly. "I used to think she was dramatic. Turns out she was right." I felt something in my chest shift the way he spoke, the weight of his tone, the hint of grief under every word. I didn't know this man, yet something about him made me want to listen. "What happened to her?" I asked. He closed his eyes briefly. "Life happened, the kind that takes things from you without asking permission." He tapped his cane on the ground. "But that's not why I'm telling you this." He studied me for a long moment. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. Lost, tired, lonely, pretending. You're fine because you think admitting otherwise is weakness." Heat crawled up my neck. "I'm not. It's not an insult," he interrupted gently. "It's an observation, and the truth, if you're brave enough to hear it. We all break at some point. The only difference is how we put ourselves back together." I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. He took a slow breath. "Do you know the worst kind of regret, Mark?" "What?" "The kind that comes from forgetting the people who remembered you." I frowned. "I don't understand." "You will," he said quietly. "Soon." Another rehook. Something in his tone suggested he wasn't speaking in metaphors. He leaned back, staring at the sky. "You ever feel like you're running from something you can't name?" I swallowed. "Every day." He nodded slowly. "Good. That means you're still alive inside." Then he said something that made the air around us still. "I've been looking for you." My heart skipped. "What?" He smiled faintly. "Not you specifically. Just you. Someone like you. Someone who'd listen." My pulse eased a little. "Listen to what?" "To the part of my story I've never told anyone." I felt a strange mix of unease and curiosity. "Why me?" "Because you look like someone who still believes in second chances." He turned his body toward me, his expression softening. "I'm going to tell you something now, and once you hear it, you won't forget it." "Okay," I whispered. He clasped his hands together, trembling slightly. "My wife, she didn't die the way everyone thinks." A chill moved across my skin. "What do you mean?" "She didn't slip in the bathroom. She wasn't alone." He stared at the pond, voice tightening. "I was there." My breath caught. "What happened?" He closed his eyes. "I made a mistake. A terrible one. One I've carried for almost 40 years." I didn't speak. I couldn't, he continued, voice shaking. She wasn't well. She had moments where the world slipped away from her. And that morning, I wasn't patient. I wasn't kind. I raised my voice. She panicked. She stepped back. He swallowed hard. And one small step became the last step she ever took. I felt my chest tighten. Edward, he lifted a trembling hand. Don't comfort me. I don't deserve it. Silence swallowed the space between us. After a long moment, he whispered, I've spent every Wednesday here trying to forgive myself. But forgiveness, it's a currency you can't earn alone. I looked at him, really looked at him. His grief wasn't theatrical. It was rearranged into every line on his face. But something still didn't add up. Why? Tell me this, I asked. Because, he said, looking at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much younger. Before she died, she said something I never understood. My heart pounded. What did she say? He swallowed. He'll come back here someday, and you'll know him when you see him. A shiver ran through me. Who was she talking about? You, he whispered. I stared at him. Stunned me. She didn't even know me. Maybe not, he murmured, but she knew someone would come. Someone who needed the story as much as I needed to tell it. He leaned closer. You're not lost, Mark. You're waiting. Those are two different things. My eyes burned. Waiting for what? For the truth, he said, and I haven't even told you the hardest part yet. What's the hardest part? His voice dropped to a tremor. She wasn't the only one I failed. A heavy, terrible pause. Then he whispered, before she died, she made me promise something. A promise I broke. A promise that involves you, even though you don't know it yet. My pulse thundered in my ears. What does it have to do with me? He looked at me with a grief so deep it felt like falling. Because, Mark, he drew a shaky breath. You remind me of the child I should have raised. The world tilted. I leaned back, stunned. I don't understand. You will, he whispered, when I tell you who I used to be, and what it has to do with your family. The wind picked up, scattering leaves at our feet. The air thickened. My heart pounded. And then he said the words that would dismantle everything I thought I knew about my life. Mark, I knew your mother. For a moment, the world around us seemed to fall into complete silence. The kind that makes even the wind hold its breath. Because when Edward said he knew my mother, something inside me shifted slowly at first. Then, all at once, like a puzzle piece I never knew was missing, suddenly snapping into place. But pointing toward a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I stared at him, stunned, my pulse pounding in my ears. My mother, I repeated, barely able to push the word out. He nodded, his eyes softening with a grief that made my stomach tighten. I knew her very well, he said quietly. More than you might think, more than I ever had the right to. The bench felt suddenly too small, too fragile to hold the weight in his voice. My breath caught. How when? He looked out at the lake, as if the answers were floating somewhere on its rippling surface. A long time ago, he murmured. Before you were born, before everything went wrong. I waited, heart hammering, as he gathered the courage to continue. I met your mother here, on this very bench. She was younger than you are now, bright, quick-witted, kind in a way the world doesn't often make people anymore. His lips curved into a faint, painful smile. She had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person who existed. I wasn't special, she just had a gift for seeing the broken pieces in people and holding them gently. A familiar ache spread across my chest. That sounded exactly like her. I was a mess back then, he admitted. Drinking too much, angry at everything, failing at almost every part of my life. And yet, she sat here with me. She didn't judge. She didn't pity. She just cared. I swallowed hard. I never heard anything about this. Of course you didn't, he said softly. She kept it quiet. For your sake, for mine, and because of the promise she made me swear to keep. The air felt heavier. What promise? He turned to me then with eyes that glistened like someone fighting a battle inside himself. To disappear, he whispered. To stay out of her life. Out of your life? A cold shiver crawled up my spine. Why would she ask you that? Because, he said, voice trembling, I wasn't a safe person then. I was unpredictable. I was angry. I was hurting so loudly, I couldn't hear anyone else's needs. He swallowed hard, and I was dangerous to myself. I stared at him, trying to piece together the man he was describing, man so far from the gentle soul on the bench beside me that it almost felt impossible. Did she help you? He gave a small nod. Yes, more than she should have, more than I deserved. She brought me meals when I refused to eat, encouraged me to get help, sat with me when I shook from withdrawal. She reminded me that there was still something worth living for. His voice cracked, but I clung to her so tightly I didn't see I was pulling her down with me. A lump formed in my throat. One night, he continued, after I had another relapse, she told me she couldn't keep saving me, that she needed to think about her future, that she couldn't be my lifeline forever. He paused. I was so ashamed, so angry with myself, that I promised her I would go. I would stay away. I would rebuild myself far from her world, so I couldn't hurt her anymore. I clenched my hands. And you left. I did, he whispered, and it was the hardest thing I ever did. But what does that have to do with me? I asked, my voice shaking. He turned to me fully now, the wind brushing through his thin white hair. She was pregnant when I left. My blood turned to ice. I froze. No words, no breath, just a sudden violent pounding in my chest. Pregnant, I repeated, the word breaking apart as it left my mouth. He nodded slowly, tears filling his eyes. I didn't know. Not then. She never told me until much later. Years later, I felt the world tilt. And when you found out, he let out a shaky breath. She wrote me a letter. His voice grew soft. She said that the child had a good father, a kind one, someone who could give him stability, love, safety. She said my part in her story had ended, and she didn't want me to ruin yours. My heart twisted. My father, he wasn't my biological father. Edward shook his head. He was your real father, he said firmly, in every way that mattered. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does, and he loved you deeply. I wiped at my eyes. The park blurred around me. But why are you telling me this now? I whispered. Why, after all this time? His chin trembled. Because I made another promise. A promise I broke. What promise? He looked at me with a pain so raw it made my chest ache. I promised her that when you were old enough, I would tell you the truth. I would tell you who I was, why I left, and why I never came back. But I never did. I was too ashamed, too afraid, too late. Silence fell thick, suffocating, impossibly heavy. Then he whispered, almost inaudibly, I'm your biological father, Mark. The words hit me like a blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. No, I breathed. No, that can't. It's the truth, he whispered, and I've been carrying it for too long. I shook my head, fighting tears. Why now? He closed his eyes. Because I don't have much time left. My heart lurched violently. What do you mean? He placed a trembling hand over his chest. I'm sick, he said. Cancer. Late stage. The doctors gave me months, maybe less. I didn't want to die without you knowing who I was. His voice cracked. Without hearing me say I'm sorry. Emotions surged through me, confusion, pain, disbelief, anger tangled into a single, overwhelming storm. I stood abruptly, pacing in front of the bench. You can't just drop something like that on someone, I cried. You can't vanish from someone's entire life and show up when you're dying and expect them to. I don't expect anything, he whispered. Not forgiveness, not love, not even understanding. I only wanted to give you the truth your mother couldn't bear to say. I pressed my palms into my eyes, trying to steady my breath. All these years, I whispered, all these years, and you were just out there. He nodded, watching from a distance. I knew where you lived. I knew when your mother passed. I went to the funeral. You didn't see me. His voice broke. I didn't go near you. I wasn't sure I had the right. I turned to him slowly. But you sat here every Wednesday. Yes, he said softly, because she told me, in that last letter she ever sent, that one day you'd come to this park, that one day you'd find this bench, and that if I waited long enough, I might get to tell you who I really was. Tears blurred my vision. And she was right, he added, voice trembling. You came. A long, painful silence fell between us. Then Edward whispered the sentence that destroyed me. I didn't come here today to be your father. I came to say goodbye, as the man who wished he could have been one. My legs buckled under me, and I sat beside him again. Trembling, he looked smaller, now fragile, aging, fading before my eyes. I don't know what to do with all this, I whispered. You don't have to do anything, he said gently. Just sit with me. For a little while. That's all I've wanted. One moment, one chance. I stared at him, really stared, and in his sorrowful eyes I saw something undeniable. Man who had spent a lifetime running from himself. A man who had lost the love of his life. A man who had watched his son grow up from afar. A man drowning in regret. A man trying, at the very end, to make one right choice. So I sat, We talked for hours, about my mother, about the life he tried to rebuild, about the years he wasted, about the years we lost, about everything and nothing. The sun began to set behind the oak trees. Before he left, he turned to me and said softly, "Mark, if another life ever existed where I was the man you needed, I hope that boy forgave me." My throat tightened. I whispered, "Maybe he already has." He smiled weakly. "Maybe." He walked away slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, his silhouette shrinking in the golden light like a memory fading back into the past. I watched him go, knowing nothing would ever be the same again, and I made myself a promise. I would see him again, not because he was dying, but because, after all these years, I finally found the man my mother once believed he could be. If this story touched your heart, even for a moment, I want to thank you for staying until the end. Stories like this remind us how fragile people are, how much we carry silently, and how a single conversation can change everything. I would truly love to hear what this story meant to you, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And if this journey moved you in any way, please tap the like button. It helps more than you can imagine. For more emotional life lesson stories like this one, I'd be grateful if you subscribed. Thank you for watching. Truly.